joining us for Liberty Online. Before we get into this week's message, I just want to say if you missed last week's Liberty Online, then make sure to go and check it out. Why? Because Phil presented our vision for the coming years through the lens of our new building, The Hub. We are super excited and we know you are too, so please consider giving into the building fund to help renovate the auditorium, as we will continue to collect the funds until we launch. You can find out how to do that by visiting our website, libertycentre.org.uk. And it's now time to jump into the new two-part message series called The Roadmap. Hope you enjoy.
Well, thanks for joining us for Liberty Online this morning. And I've got something super practical for you this morning. And some of you might not like that. You might say, can't we have some super spiritual, abstract concept that we can just ignore? And my argument is, no, we're not going to do that. This practical two-part message we're going to be calling The Roadmap. And even though it's really practical, I think it has spiritual consequences. And so we're going to talk about some really practical things. And so many of you will know that tomorrow is the next big step, or when we filmed this, tomorrow's supposed to be the next big step in the roadmap coming out of lockdown. And so hopefully non-essential retail will open. Woohoo! I'm very excited about that. Eating outside in restaurants should be open. And for me, what I'm most excited about isn't them two things. The thing I'm most excited about is the gym is opening. I never thought I'd ever say that. Never thought them words would come out of my face, that I was excited about the gym opening. As you might be able to tell, since lockdown started around Christmas, I've put on a little bit of weight, just half a stone, which is quite good for me. And so I'm looking forward to getting in and getting that half stone off over the next few months. But I'm excited because I have my own personal roadmap. And maybe you're at home and you don't really know me very well, but most people in our church, and particularly the people in the room who are here filming with me, know me really well and understand that I would have planned out my own personal roadmap out of lockdown months ago and probably had 5 or 6 different versions of them. But so like, for instance, tomorrow morning, as long as we're allowed, really early in the morning, I'll be getting up and going to the gym, boom, smash out a session. And then after that, probably have to pop to Sports Direct to buy new gym clothes when I've realised I don't fit in my gym clothes that I went into the gym with because they're all a little bit too tight now. And then on the way back home, I'd probably just pop into Wetherspoons for a breakfast. And that's a joke because I will not be doing that if I'm at the gym. But I've got a serious question for all of you at home. And the question is, really, have you planned your roadmap? You see, our government's planned the roadmap out of lockdown. And I want you to ask yourself, have you planned your roadmap? Because I think, and maybe you won't agree, but I don't really care, that everyone has been affected by lockdown in some way. Everyone's been affected in some way, whether it's just a little bit or whether it's something major. And maybe you don't think it's affected you at all. And I would argue that it probably has in some way, but you might just be ignorant to the fact because it hasn't manifested itself particularly at the moment. But I want you to think about this, we've spent 1 year and 3 weeks conforming to a way of life that's not natural for us. We've been forced into it, and rightly so. I'm not moaning about any of that side of things, but we've been forced into conforming to a way of life that isn't natural for us. For some of us, it was a complete change. For others, it was just small changes. But the consequences of that are immeasurable, I think. The consequences can be physical, they can be emotional, they can be social, they can be developmental. They can be spiritual even. We've been forced into isolation, which if you're someone who's wired like me, that's not good for me. We've been forced into disconnection. And if we're not careful, we'll stay there. And I know we've got amazing technologies like Zoom and other platforms are available that you can connect with people online, but it's not the same. We've been forced into isolation, forced into disconnection. And if we're not careful, we will stay there. You will stay in that place, not because of fear of a virus, which perhaps was present in our communities early on, of fear of what could happen, but out of habit. We can stay in them places of isolation and disconnection out of habit, out of what I call the security of normality. It's become our new normal. And there was a lot of expression about this phrase, a new normal, when COVID was first around. but just out of the security of normality, this new normality, we've got used to being disconnected and isolated from all of the people that we were so well connected with before. We've become little islands in some regards, in so many ways. It's become our new normal, but you can't stay there if you really want to live. So I ask again, have you planned your roadmap? Have you planned your roadmap out of lockdown? There's a great story in the Bible that sort of exemplifies this amazingly. A family that done a proper lockdown. They done lockdown well, pucker, wicked good. A proper lockdown with no popping to Tesco's, no popping to essential shops, no going to work because you couldn't work from home. This is a proper lockdown. And the story that might pop to your mind is Noah. Think about Noah and his family. And like, even if you didn't grow up in church, you know the story of Noah. And ladies, particularly ladies at home, I want you to think about this. You think you've been locked up with animals for the last year in the form of your husband, perhaps. But Noah and his family were literally locked up in a floating zoo. And I can't imagine my house is nice. It's got a big garden where my kids can get out and run. I've got 4 kids. I can't imagine being locked in a big boat, even if it was a massive boat, not being able to go outside at all. I can't imagine I think I would throw my children overboard. No, I wouldn't. No, I would rescue them. I'd definitely rescue them, but I would feel like throwing them overboard if we were locked in a container like that. And so we're going to look at the story of Noah and his family because it's got so many lessons in it, this story. It's so rich and deep, but I just want to touch on one story and one point today that we can come out with. So let's read from Genesis 7. We're going to read 7 to 20. We're going to jump through the story for time's sake. It says this. We know what happens, but we're going to read it anyway. Verse 17, it says this. For 40 days... the flood waters grew deeper, covering the ground and lifting the boat high from the earth. As the waters rose higher and higher above the ground, the boat floated safely on the surface. Finally, the water covered even the highest mountains on the earth, rising more than 22 feet above the highest peaks. And there'll be different people who believe different things about the story of Noah, whether it was a global flood, whether it's a local flood, whatever. It's sort of irrelevant. I don't care. You can engage with this story anyway. And so I was thinking about this and thinking about Noah, and I couldn't remember, even though I've read the story loads of times, I thought to myself, how long was he confined in that boat? I couldn't remember. And I remembered 40 in my head, and I was like, was it 40 days? Was it 40 days? I can't remember. And it wasn't 40 days. Most of you who know the story well and got a better memory than me will perhaps know. But let's jump back. Genesis 8, we skip forward from verse 3. It says this. So the flood waters gradually receded from the earth. After 150 days in a boat, 150 days, exactly 5 months from the time the flood began, the boat came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. 2.5 months later, to just push past that, just 2.5 months later, as the waters continued to go down, other mountain peaks became visible. That's grown in time. And then it says in verse 6, after another 40 days, Noah opened the window he had made in the boat. He had a little peek out. He had a little look around. And it says that, and he realized, where am I? I've missed it. Oh, I realized a raven. I've completely gone wrong there. After another 40 days, Noah opened the window he had made in the boat and released. There we go. I can't read. And released a raven. The bird flew back and forth until the flood waters on the earth had dried up. He also released a dove to see if the water had been receded and if it could find dry ground. But the dove could find no place to land because the waters still covered the ground. So it returned to the boat, and Noah held out his hand and drew the dove back inside. It says this, after waiting another 7 days, Noah released the dove again. This time the dove returned to him in the evening with a fresh olive leaf in its beak. Then Noah knew that the floodwaters were almost gone. It's like this sort of feeling of us in lockdown in our country. It's like it's almost there. Things are looking like it's receding, that sort of excitement, but still not allowed out of the boat. If you're like me, you're like Tigger waiting. And it says this, that he waited, verse 12, he waited another 7 days and then released the dove again. This time it did not come back. It was out of it. The dove was done with the boat. Maybe you're done with lockdown. I want you to understand here that Noah was keen to get out. Noah was not happy. He was not content being contained. He wasn't content being contained. He knew he had to get out. He was not designed to be in lockdown. You're not designed to be in lockdown. And so he was designing his roadmap. Even before the waters were looking like they were anywhere gone, he was designing his roadmap before roads were even invented. And it goes on to say, after 10.5 months, the ground was drying. So did he get out then? Nope. Let's jump down to verse 14. It says this, 2 more months went by, and at last the earth was dry. Then God said to Noah, love this, verse 16, leave the boat, all of you. You and your wife and your sons and their wives. Release all the animals, the birds, the livestock, and all the small animals that scurry along the ground, so they can be fruitful and multiply throughout the earth. So Noah, his wife and his sons and their wives left the boat, and all of the large and small animals and birds come out of the boat pair by pair. It says this, verse 20, then Noah built an altar to the Lord, and there he sacrificed as burnt offerings the animals and birds that had been approved for that purpose. So in this story, it's recorded that for 10.5 months, plus 2 months, so that's a year and 2 weeks, right, by my maths. And I would argue probably not actually a year and 2 weeks, because it actually says earlier in Scripture that 7 days before rain started coming, that he loaded everything ready on the ark. And so if you think about it, he was confined, and him and his family were confined to being physically close to that boat. They had to be ready for feeding animals and all that sort of stuff. So in effect, really, just like our lockdown, we haven't been closed in a box all of that time. Sometimes we've ventured out, but we've had so many restrictions on what we can do. Just like Noah, so many restrictions contained in a boat that we don't want to be in, really. So in effect, Noah and his family were contained in some form of lockdown for 1 year and 3 weeks. And we went into lockdown on March 23rd, 2020. And so tomorrow, lockdown will be, a stage of lockdown will be opening up, but it would have been 1 year and 3 weeks just the same. And I did say at the beginning that the story of Noah has many lessons in it, and it does. But the one I want to focus on is summarized by verse 15 to 17. And I am paraphrasing, but it says this, leave the boat, all of you, so you can be fruitful and multiply. Leave the boat, all of you, so you can be fruitful and multiply. And so I want to say, like Noah and his family, for us, for you, it's time to step out. It's time to get out. It's time to go out. And I want to say, don't let your year-long prison contain you anymore. And I'm not just talking about going out of your house to places. It's far bigger than that. I'm not talking about just physically going out. I'm talking about emotionally, socially, spiritually. Get out of the boat. I want you to think about this. I want you to note this, that the first thing that Noah did when he got out of the boat, what does Scripture say? It says that he built an altar to God. The first thing was about God. When he had to get out of the boat, when he was coming out of his lockdown, was God first, was focused on God. And I want to encourage you, and really not encourage you, I want to warn you, don't think that you're going to drift back into relationship. Don't think you're going to drift back into being connected. Don't think you're going to drift back into fruitfulness, drift back into purpose, drift back to life. It's going to have to be a choice. It's going to have to be you being active, being proactive. You have to choose to fling open the door of your boat or your house to step out. And it's going to be choices. And so I want to ask you again, what's your roadmap? What things are you choosing to do proactively to put in place? Have you put some stakes in the ground? You know, and I'm not talking about just go to the gym in the morning, then the sports director get bigger gym clothes. Have you put some stakes in the ground to say and plan for and say, I'm going to go here, that I will be there, that I will invite them, that I will meet them outside, that I will reconnect, that I'll go back to that club, I'll go back to that sports club, I will volunteer here, that I will reconnect with those that were once so important. Probably for most of us, there have been so many relationships that have grown thin or separated or been isolated from. What is your roadmap to rebuilding them relationships? Have you put a stake in the ground and say, I will go to church on this date or as soon as we're able to? Have you made that decision? Have you put that on your roadmap? You see, for perhaps some of you, or maybe just some of you at home, when the COVID reign started, you closed the door of the ark of your life on God even as well. And I want to encourage you that, the land is drying up. And I want to encourage you to get your feet on firm ground. And there's no firmer or more solid ground than that of Jesus. And so no matter if you coasted through lockdown a little bit and it's not been too bad for you, or if you feel like you've been drowning next to the boat instead of actually being in the boat, I want to encourage you to get out, step out, to go out. Like God said to Noah, leave the boat, all of you, so you can be fruitful and multiply. So I want to encourage you in whatever way that you need to do that is to fling open your ark door and plan your roadmap. And we as a church, Liberty Church, have our own Liberty roadmap. We've got a roadmap, a plan of what we want to do to reopen and engage. And so for some of you, this is the plan, and it might change, just like the national lockdown. But on the 7th of May, we hope to complete on our new home, on our new building, on our hub. So hopefully on the May 7th, we'll have the keys. And this might all change. It might be pushed back, but this is the plan. This is the roadmap. We'll have the keys by 7th of May. On Sunday, May the 9th, hopefully you guys will be able to come and join us and have live walkthroughs on a tour. On Monday the 10th, that's when our refurb will start. You can even go on the website and sign up to help refurb our place, and it'll be COVID safe, so get involved. I want to encourage you, put that on your roadmap. By the end of May, hopefully with the government roadmap, we can align ours so that by the end of May on Sundays outside, we can have 30 people gathering, and we're going to be doing barbecue church. Now that sounds good. Barbecue church. We'll do salads as well for you guys who don't eat meat and stuff. So barbecue church where you can come along and we can get together outside in a nice outside area that we had refurbed for everybody. And by the end of June, we want to be relaunching Liberty Church at the hub. And so I want to ask you, you being purposeful, we're being purposeful about coming out of lockdown. Are you? For the last time, I ask you, have you planned your roadmap? Have you planned your roadmap? And you might think, well, why is this so important? This is just practical stuff. What's this got to do with God or with church or anything? Well, the reason I think it's important is because it's not just about you, and it's really about everyone and about forever. Because Jesus said, go into all the world and preach the gospel. He said, go and make disciples of all nations. And my point is, how can we do that if we stay within our four walls? And I don't mean just the four walls of our house, but the four walls of our life. How can you do that unless you expand your life out once more? How can you do that without being purposeful and without making a roadmap, without making a choice to step out and live again? And so in these coming days, these coming weeks, the months and years ahead, you get to choose your roadmap. You get to choose how to do that. And I encourage you to choose a road that leads you back into a healthy, connected life when you can be fruitful and multiply. We can get reconnected into church, into a family, into a church that loves you, into a new home in our new hub. So, I've got my roadmap. Have you planned yours? And we're going to continue this next week as we finish up the roadmap. Thanks.
Well, thanks for joining Liberty Online today. Make sure you are here again next week for the second part and the last part of the Roadmap series. Bye for now.